citizen.
Out of many
we are world citizens. Same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voice.
Welcome to another episode of the People Powered Planet podcast, where each week we bring you amazing solutionaries. The People Powered Planet was a term we coined with Gary Davis, world citizen number one, one of the preeminent solutionaries who led the way with a vision for how we could run our world by we the people governing it above and beyond the nations that divide us. Well, today we have a very special guest, a guest who actually knew Gary well. They're in Burlington, Vermont, and it is Charlotte Dennett. Now, Charlotte Dennett is an investigative reporter. She's an author. She's an art historian. Also, she's written the best article about Gary Davis and also about Television Event, the film that we're promoting on PBS stations coming up starting in April. Her books include The People versus Bush, One Lawyer's Campaign to Bring the President to Justice, a book she wrote with her husband called Thy Will Be Done, The Conquest of the Amazon, Nelson Rockefeller and Evangelism in the Age of Oil. And the book that we're mainly going to be talking about today, which is Follow the Pipelines, Uncovering the Mystery of a Lost Spy and the Deadly Politics of the Great Game of Oil. Now she's a prolific writer of articles in Huffington Post and CounterPunch and so on. So welcome, Charlotte.
Oh, great to be with you.
Tell us a little bit more about the origins of your journey and investigation into the Age of Oil.
Yeah, well, the spy was my father. He was America's first master spy in the Middle East. This was during World War II. He was recruited into the OSS, which eventually, in late 45, early 46, became the Central Intelligence Group, which was the immediate predecessor of the CIA. And he died in a mysterious plane crash in March 1947 after a top secret mission to Saudi Arabia. I was an infant and I never knew my father, but later on, long story short, born in Beirut, ended up going back to Beirut for 2 years of high school. And then after my mother's death, I became a journalist for the Beirut Daily Star. Anyway, in the process of living there and reporting there, I began to think I was following in my father's footsteps and I needed to know more about him. So I started investigating. I had his last report, his last letter home, and I found a whole bunch of documents declassified in the National Archives. So with that material, I started to really explore what was going on. What was this trip to Saudi Arabia about? And very briefly, his mission was to try to determine the safest route for the Trans-Arabian Pipeline, which was going to take Saudi oil to Europe. It was going to cross the Arabian Peninsula. And the big issue was, where was its terminal point going to be? And lo and behold, there were two possibilities. One of them was in Haifa, then Palestine. And the other one was in southern Lebanon. So, and there were actually internal disputes about this. Anyway, my father favored Lebanon because there was too much conflict going on at the time. The Jews who had emigrated there, they were survivors of the Holocaust, and they wanted it to terminate in Haifa, and some of the oil people were okay with that. My father, but they were fighting the British for their independence, and no bank, for instance, wants to work on any kind of project if there's unrest. This is very key to understanding all the wars in the Middle East and so on, which we can get into. But that's how I got into all the intrigues that go behind establishing a safe route for a pipeline. And, there was another author who coined the term arteries of empire. That was way back in 47. It was a State Department official. He came to realize that the Trans-Arabian pipeline was key to turning the United States into an empire, not just the Middle East, but a world power. So that's how I got into the subject. And just one last point, one of my father's quotes from declassified documents, and this was made in 44. He's, of all the objectives that he was supposed to accomplish, what he wrote is protection of the oil. It must happen at all costs. And he was talking about Saudi oil, because the vision is Saudi oil was going to help supply the Pacific War. But even more important, it was going to help the reconstruction of Europe after the war through the Marshall Plan and get Europe off of its dependence on coal, which was often administered and run by communist-run labor unions, and get it into oil, which would be, of course, American supplied. So that was the importance of this pipeline. And as the New York Times reported 2 weeks before my father's death, the economic and military control of this pipeline is preeminent. So that's when I began to understand the importance of pipelines, because you can get the oil, but you got to get it to market, right? How are you going to do it? And what territory is it going to go through? In a way, it's sort of like what they were figuring out in the conquest of the American West centuries ago. You know, who's hostile? Who are the hostile tribes? How are you going to pacify them if you want to go into their territory? So this was happening in 47. The pipeline was finally built in 1949. There was a coup that overthrew the president of Syria. He didn't want the pipeline terminating in Palestine, and that was the first CIA coup. It was Syria, not Iran. And then I just followed it. I followed the pipelines all the way up to the endless wars that we've been having: Afghanistan, Iraq, Gaza, and Ukraine. They're all energy related.
The general public impression that we're given is that that the United States is the good guys going around the world solving people's problems wherever there's these evil aggressors, and we're these evil dictators, and we're overthrowing them. It's sort of like that. I remember that Bob Dylan song. It said, the Lone Ranger and Tonto riding down the line, solving everybody's problems, everybody except mine. Well, here we are solving everybody's problems, meddling around the world, all with all these good intentions. Is that kind of a cover story?
Well, I mean, it's been used ad infinitum. We're saving the world for democracy. That was World War I that turned into a disaster, right?
Right.
And fast forward to Iraq and Afghanistan. We didn't come out so well in those two wars. There was the destruction, huge humanitarian crisis in Yemen, which is now not mentioned. When they talk about going after the Houthi because they're bombing ships in the Red Sea, and there's no mention of how the U.S. was helping to supply Saudi Arabia to bomb the Yemenis, and created a huge humanitarian crisis there. Okay, that's been forgotten. Now we've got an enormous crisis in Gaza. And how the United States can think that it's coming off as the great champion of protecting people's rights, the world sees through it now. And Netanyahu, he's not helping Israel. He is hurting it. And Biden has finally come to realize that. So because of a lot of pressure from protesters in the United States, I mean, he's got the United States directly complicit in genocide, and we're watching it on TV. There are other acts of genocide that have happened before, and of course during the Holocaust we weren't getting that on TV, right? So right. Anyway.
Well, so what does, I mean, we don't hear about Gaza having anything to do with oil.
No, it's as usual, it's censored out. And one of the reasons that happened is because oil continues to be the fuel of the military. Every major military in the world is the largest consumer of oil. And until it converts to a different power source, Of course, nuclear power, how safe is that gonna make us? But at any rate, until that happens, you're gonna have this scramble among the big powers for oil because they learned a lesson from both World War I and World War II. The lesson was Germany lost both those wars because they ran out of gas. Their Air Force, their tanks, their lorries, they ran out of gas. So every world power now understands if it wants to be a major player on the world, it's got to find and control oil. Natural gas is very important now as well. And they don't want competitors to get it. So it's just, my father predicted there'd be a real quote unquote free for all after World War II. And that was among our allies. They were all competing against the United States. The French and the British and the Soviets were deeply resentful that the United States had gotten an exclusive concession over Saudi oil. And in retrospect, I can understand why they'd be resentful because that exclusive concession still exists. Although now it's Saudi Aramco, pulling in billions of dollars of profits. And as one person who had worked directly with oil companies told me, they don't care what it takes to get the oil at all costs. They don't care if they cause a war. They don't care if they have to assassinate somebody or cause regime change. They're going to do it one way or another. And this is what's, in my opinion, is trapping the Biden administration. And we can get into that more, but there's security agreements between the U.S. and Israel, which makes it complicated for Biden. But go ahead and ask questions. I'm rambling on too much.
Well, tell us about the initial planning document for the defense planning.
For a new American century, is that the one you're
Yes.
talking about? Yeah, that was in 97. That's when the neocons were contemplating that they may come into power soon. And of course they did under George W. Bush. And so, yeah, they already had a plan. And the plan was to conquer, let's see, 7 countries in 5 years. And those countries were Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. Gee, what do they all have in common? And what's happening? I mean, they're barely functioning as healthy economies right now. Iraq's got problems. Syria has flattened. Lebanon is a failed state. Libya, ditto. Sudan, oh my God, there's famine in Sudan. That's all about oil. Anyway, Iran is our enemy. Honestly, that was the plan. And actually, I don't think they really have achieved what they had wanted to do. And these are the neocons. Dick Cheney was a major player in this, of course, with Halliburton as a major oil supply company that's very much involved in pipeline infrastructure support. Somebody who worked closely with him, Victoria Nuland, has later become a top State Department official for the Biden administration. So now suddenly you've got sort of neocon types cooperating with neoliberals to, again, accomplish their objectives. And I might add just one other thing, that beginning in 2000, there were major discoveries of oil and natural gas off the coast of Gaza. Hello, that's in 2000. And another major one in 2010 off the coast of Israel. So now the value of this oil and natural gas off the Mediterranean coast is, get this, $500 billion worth. So Israel sees itself as becoming a major energy corridor. And in order to achieve this, of course, they got to get rid of all conflict, because otherwise no bank will support such a huge investment as in pipelines. But there's already a deal. The European Union has gotten into a deal with Israel to cooperate in the development of its field, the Leviathan. And the whole reason is because the Europe needs the natural gas and the oil because of the Ukraine war, which shut down Russian supplies of natural gas, which was cheaper to Europe. So it's all interrelated.
That Defense Planning Guidance Report basically was advocating U.S. military dominance around the world, and it was a strategy for how to create that dominance. And I think that also gives us a different picture of what the world looks like, because how is the current power struggles that we're seeing, rather than being a struggle to save democracy, rather than that being a struggle for the dominance, American dominance in this era.
I mean, the world is catching on fast enough that the United States has become a declining imperial power. It's just, you know, it happens in every empire. It's happening to this one now. And it's stretched too far. This probably has to do with the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. And so the United States has to focus on what its immediate security needs are. This is a hypothesis, but I think it's pretty well based on fact that the U.S. and NATO countries had hoped that they could come up with an economic development plan that would very much involve Israel and Saudi Arabia. And the whole idea was they were going to develop the oil and natural gas resources, and they would create this the rather peaceful transformation, because they were all going to benefit economically. But the problem was that Netanyahu, right from the outset, and some of his generals have been opposed to sharing the natural gas off of the Gaza coast with the Gazans. That was what 2 invasions were about previous to the current war. Those were in 2009, 2010, and 2014. And we have statements from the generals that, in fact, I don't know, I'd have to hunt for it right now. But yeah, they're just saying we're not going to allow the oil, the resources from the natural gas to go to the Gazans. It's not going to trickle down. They said it's going to go to finance terrorism, so we can't allow it to happen. And they haven't allowed it. You know, the Israelis instituted a blockade, and they're totally controlled. They're in control over Gazan resources, and they're an occupying power. So how is the United States and NATO countries going to change this dynamic? They're putting pressure on Netanyahu, but his whole goal has backfired seriously, I think. It just hasn't gone as envisioned. And now it's got the United States, its whole standing in the world has been quote unquote shredded. And this is by an admiral who has said this recently. I mean, they're really worried, because not only Israel's reputation in the world, but the United States is taking a sharp decline. So who knows where it's all going to end up.
So it's kind of a circular thing that we have to fight for oil, and yet the very fighting for oil is what causes more battles. And we're, rather than obtaining oil, we're actually ending up screwing ourselves over with by thinking that by applying more and more military force, we can somehow change these things. When I was reading you're talking about the Great Game, I was reminded of the film War Games, in which it was a wonderful film about the whole nuclear issue, but it was a kid who cracks into the Pentagon computers. But anyway, in the end, the Pentagon computers planning out war games, he gets it to play against itself, and it tries every possible strategy to win a nuclear war. And you see the missiles shooting all over the screen this way and that way. And it finally stops with silence and says, "Strange game. The only way to win is not to play the game." And tell me about how that might fit into this great game of oil that we're playing.
I mean, the British started it. It was over Central Asia. Who's going to control Central Asia? And then you get into the age of oil. I mean, the starting of World War I has been linked to the Berlin to Baghdad Railway, which was a result of Germany making incursions into the Middle East towards Iran. And the British were freaked out about that. This railway that was going to go there in return for building it for the Turks, which controlled the Middle East through the Ottoman Empire, granted concessions, oil concessions to either side of the railroad. So railroads were the precursor, had a huge influence in the Great Game, and then later they were replaced by pipelines and oil tankers. But a lot of it now is not about competition with Germany. It's about competition with Russia. And that goes all the way back to World War II. And when the Washington Post wrote this great article on the Trans-Arabian Pipeline, March 2, 1947, they talk about this pipeline as causing new issues in the Middle East, new competitions, and they particularly singled out, quote, the role of Russia. So here we are, it's just the Cold War started over oil, and then it eventually ended, so to speak, for a while. And now it's back in the competition with Russia. And mind you, I don't see it as a competition through ideologies. That's how they try to play it. We're the great democracy, and they're the dictatorial powers. But in reality, it's all about controlling oil. And Ukraine is about lessening European dependence on Russian oil and trying to build pipelines that bypass the Russians, because the Russians, up until the Ukraine war, were supplying Europe with 40% of their energy needs. And the United States felt very threatened by the construction of the pipeline, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which was going to bring even more natural gas to Europe. And it was very clear. Biden himself said that it had to stop. And the first sanction after the Russians invaded Ukraine was against the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that was going to bring oil to Germany and then get distributed. So this is the game. It's still going on. And Biden has had to run around trying to find alternative supplies. He had to go hat in hand to Saudi Arabia, which he previously had called a pariah state because it had killed an opponent, namely a Khashoggi, the Washington Post reporter. They called it Mohammed bin Salman, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. His nickname is MBS, Mohammed Bonesaw, because they literally cut the man into many pieces. What a horrible story. Anyway, it was denounced, but after the war in Ukraine, Biden had to go hat in hand and say, please keep energy prices down. We got to work together. And then they were trying to bring this whole rapprochement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And that's what sparked the Hamas operation. They realized that they were going to be left out of the calculus, that their rights to any kind of autonomy was not being given consideration. The whole idea was just, if we give them oil royalties, everybody will be happy, but completely ignoring the whole history of decades of Israeli occupation of that part of the world. So the Great Game is still off and running. They're looking into new areas. They're looking into the Arctic. They're looking into more of the Mediterranean Sea, around Cyprus and Turkey, that whole area. Desperate search for energy supplies. And they'll do it at all costs, The cost in human life. I mean, this war, the brutality of the war in Gaza, which has now been exceeded all other current wars in terms of deaths in a short period of time. And now the targeting of children, it's just appalling. It is really backfiring on the United States and Israel, I have to say. And I don't know what's going to happen. Is Israel going to launch its assault on Rafah? I don't know. There's a lot of pressure against it, but
so we were told that this invasion, that this whole bombing effort was in retaliation for the Hamas incursion into Israel. Um, how does that tie into what was a great game to get the oil?
well, first of all, as I said, the Likud party through Netanyahu and his generals wanted to keep the oil and natural gas out of the hands of the Gazans. And so they, this what's happened right now is the third military operation. This time, the whole idea is to completely wipe them out. And I have a document here, official secret Israeli document revealed, expel all Palestinians from Gaza. And this is from the intelligence ministry. It was leaked. I have a quote here, make it clear there is no hope of returning. And so that was the plan. The thing is, it became too awful, too bloody. And so, Netanyahu thinks that he can finish the job. And I actually think that maybe the Biden administration had been convinced that maybe this was possible, but the civilian deaths were really screwing it up. And because Israel is now basically a fascist country. And this is really sad because apparently, obviously, the October 7th attacks traumatized the people of Israel and Jews around the world. Totally understandable. It was brutal. I think we will find a final reckoning of everything that happened on October 7th. But at any rate, it has hardened Israelis. Apparently, that's what I'm hearing. There are many protests, of course, but generally speaking, my understanding is that Israel's population wants to get rid of Hamas. And as outside observers say, you're not going to get rid of them. You're not going to get rid of the idea. The idea is, quite frankly, resistance. They've been under occupation for decades. And this is the story that isn't told, but more and more it's coming out. You can't just look at what is going to be the day after with Gaza. You got to look at what was the day before and the decades before. We have information that the Netanyahu was aware of the plan a year before, knew all about it. And then you had Egypt right before the attack, Egyptian intelligence warning Netanyahu was going to happen. So this is all going to be analyzed when the war ends or Netanyahu is removed from power. There's much more to be learned about this whole thing, but it is truly tragic.
So is the big picture, and you talk about this in the book, that it's an effort to basically replace that area with a pipeline. Well, talk about the pipeline or the canal
and infrastructure plans. Yeah, one of them is the Ben Gurion Canal, and that is going to run. Now, they've already started working on it, is my understanding. It's going to run from the tip of Gaza and go south and go into the Gulf of Aqaba, which is controlled by Jordan, and then that links in eventually to the Red Sea. And it comes out close to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has huge development plans, and they want to turn part of their coast into this like a very advanced technological enterprise, as well as tourism. So this is going to further cement the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel. That's the plan, and it will give a shorter route to the Mediterranean than through the Suez Canal, which is controlled by Egypt. This is a new project, so that's in the works. And then, as I say, there's interest in maybe reviving the Trans-Arabian pipeline, which had terminated in southern Lebanon, and which was only, a couple hundred miles away that had terminated in southern Lebanon. Now they want it to terminate in Haifa. And, Netanyahu was a great cheerleader of Bush's invasion into Iraq. And one of the reasons was he wanted to reopen a pipeline that had been closed in 1948. It had been built in the 30s. If you look on the cover of my book, it will show the map, and it will show these three pipeline routes. This is the projected Trans-Arabian pipeline. And then there's this Iraq petroleum pipeline that was built in the 30s. And so Netanyahu's idea was, after the invasion, they were going to topple Saddam Hussein, put in an Iraqi exiled leader named Ahmed Shalabi. He was in favor of reopening that pipeline. And the only reason that went askew is because it was revealed that he was the author of the weapons of mass destruction lie, which was the pretext for the invasion of Iraq. So Netanyahu had said in 2003 that soon the oil will be flowing to Haifa. It's not a pipe dream. Well, it's still a pipe dream, but they're probably still working on it. This is the dream. Total domination by energy interests of the whole Eastern Mediterranean. And if you look on the map, if you're going to run pipelines, you will find that Lebanon's been flattened, right? Syria's been largely flattened. So that's the goal. But it keeps running into opposition and catastrophe and terrible loss of lives. I mean, this reliance on oil, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to connect with the climate activists, because they all understand that oil companies lie, and that they have to be fought, but they haven't made the connection to the endless wars. And possibly one of the reasons is because obviously it's very complicated, I mean, there are all sorts of ethnic divisions and ethnic loyalties and so on. But the underlying force, the underlying driving force, is the great game for oil. And hopefully we can expand all of our movements to understand who the real culprit is, and that'll get us away from hating Arabs or hating Jews. Let's look at who the people who are really profiting off of this, who are even getting us closer to destroying our own planet. And then you bring in the nuclear issue, because let's face it, the big issue that never gets discussed is how many nuclear weapons does Israel have? I mean, we know there's hundreds, right? And now they're all worried about Iran becoming a nuclear power. Well, yeah, I can understand why they would be worried about that. But once we get into the area of, by the way, artificial intelligence, I don't know if you've heard this one. They're getting worried that that drone warfare can happen without any human input. That's where they're seeing AI going. So what does that mean if suddenly there is a decision that it's in the best interest to bomb a certain area using a tactical nuclear weapon? We're in a very dangerous time.
Okay, so we're in a dangerous time, and our movie is about solution areas. What are the solutions? So right now, we're seeing that big oil is behind both the destruction of the environment and endless wars. And if you knew Gary Davis well. What is the solution that and could the key to the solution be in something that Gary was advocating, which is Gary was advocating what he called mundialization, a global cities movement, that while the nation states are so broken down and leading us toward wars and environmental destruction and can't get it together, we see all across the country, in many cities and municipalities, have begun to go green, connect with others. Cities, that Gary would say that cities are real. The nation states are just lines we drew on the planet, but cities, actually, you can look at satellite images from outer space at night and you see all these cities. They're really part of the planet. That somehow that people interconnecting together from city to city, solving these problems and interrelating and taking the rug out from under big oil because we don't need the oil anymore. Do you see some solutions possibly in the evolution of what Gary did call the people-powered planet?
Well, I mean, Gary was a wonderful visionary, and so of course this is what we would want. Accomplishing it is another question, because let's face it, big oil is hugely powerful. But on the other hand, I have great faith in the younger generation because they can see that they're going to be the victims if it's allowed to reign the way it has now. So the younger people, maybe they'll be like our generation. Our generation was fighting the Vietnam War, right? And that ended in a disaster for the U.S. But so now we need a much broader movement. And I used to think, like, after the pandemic, maybe we'd have this great renaissance of thinking, because just, in the Renaissance in Italy was a result largely of horror about the Black Death and all the inequalities that were exposed then in the like 13th, 14th century. And so you had this great flowering of productivity and more secular understanding of the world. The church was less in power, and that was the flourishing that happened in Italy. Some would also call it the beginning of capitalism, which was an improvement over feudalism. Now we've got to find something that is a viable improvement over capitalism, in my view, and that's where the struggle is going to go on. And because the stakes are so high, which is the very survival of our planet, and the horror over genocide, maybe enough people will get it together to take on these powerful interests. And let's see what happens in the elections in 2024. Oh my goodness. I mean, yeah, it's sort of like an amazing time to be alive, but a time of dread too. Do we want fascism in America? And frankly, there are a lot of Americans like me who say, what choice do we have? The neoliberal imperial choice on a grand scale, or fascism in the United States through Netanyahu. There's got to be another way, I'm thinking, and we could talk about it, but somehow I think maybe humanity is going to join together and see the risks and say enough is enough already. Our survival is at stake.
Wow,
we can hope.
That's a beautiful place to end, and that's exactly what Gary was advocating, that humanity come together, use these tools we have at our disposal, and rise above the idiotic systems. The war, the terrible thing about war is that the more they apply it and the more it fails, the more they do more wars, which fails even more, so they do even more. And the only solution really is for humanity to rise, as you mentioned. And so at this point, I'd like to open up for questions for some of our participants here who are part of humanity, to begin to ask you some questions and help us move towards solutions. Go ahead, Melanie, take on the questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Arthur. And thank you so much, Charlotte. Yes, this is a invigorating talk, and but also exciting in a way, because as we're finding out, I mean, we can no longer put things off. Ever since, of course, we've got the nuclear bomb, and ever since we've noticed climate change, you can kind of let it go to the next generation. You were talking about the young folks really feeling active and ready to go, because now their backs are really against the wall, because they see that this is the time, and they see the link between the fossil fuels, we got to keep them in the ground. And then people are linking wars with that. And thank you so much for your book. And I highly recommend it. It's so full of information. Oh my gosh. So yes, this is the time. This is the time when things are happening. This is the time when people can do things. This is the time to not sit back and let someone else do it. Pick something and do it and help out and get us out of this. So yes, we're going to go to questions. We have just a little bit of time we're going to close right on the hour. So we've got to be very vigilant. So we're going to go first to Faisal. Faisal, go ahead with your question, please.
Thanks a lot, and thank you for having this webinar. So I wanted to just talk about Israel and China at this point, not just the US, but China is also developing ports in Israel. It's building railways in Israel. China's the exposure to the technology transfer that began its rise all came from the US through Israel, according to Whitney Webb. So what does Charlotte think about China's influence in the Middle East, and how important is that?
China's moving big time all over. It's what is it? It's Belt and I'm trying to think of it. I always forget the name of it, but it's got an initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative. And they're building infrastructure projects in the Middle East and Africa, and it's freaking out the US. This is the great game. Right now, that's what we're looking at. So I was not aware of these Chinese investments in the Port of Israel. And again, I mean, I think, all great powers are looking at, including the Israelis, like, what's going to benefit us? What are we going to get out of it? They really want to develop themselves, as I say, as a power and energy corridor. By the way, Turkey also, which has actually largely achieved that. So with the Chinese coming in there, who knows where this is all going to lead? Chevron, the hugely powerful American oil company, which was responsible as the former Standard Oil of California, developing the oil of Saudi Arabia. Now they're in there in the Eastern Mediterranean. So the competition is going on. And I can't predict, but thank you for alerting me to that point. It's easy enough to follow the pipelines. All you got to do is Google, find a world conflict that's raging like that. Sudan, Google Sudan and oil. I mean, it's easy enough to find it. It's not widely reported, but you can document it. Just Google it.
Yes.
Now I'm going to Google China and oil development in Israel. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Faisal, for that. Yes. Now, quickly, we'll go to Jack. Jack, go right ahead.
I have 8 grandkids coming through this, and so I understand the worry about the future there of the most intelligent, stupid species on Earth. And my thought, I think there is a solution coming. I think that just simply follow the money. You can follow the oil, but follow the money. And AI, I think, and supercomputing will follow the money. And now, if you gave every person on this earth right now $10,000 US a month, you would have harmony and peace beyond where we are right now. And the people like Putin and Netanyahu or whoever, 10 million's enough, folks. 10's enough for you. So when the transparency of where the money is and the different leadership in the different countries, once we can actually expose through the 4-way test and the 8 pillars of a creative society that has been developed, and we take those particular issues and AI exposes when the corruption starts, and when the child dies, when the little girl dies on the earth somewhere, once we expose who did that and how they did that, I think a whole new society globally can happen. That's my hope. And so I don't know. I'm really beginning to think that AI is more intelligent than us. I use it to draft stuff right now, and it would take me a year to do what it does in 30 seconds. So I really think there is the good side of transparency, AI, supercomputing, and a will to keep a child alive, not killed them. And the oil
Oh,
people
that's-
are despicable in that regard. Like the one that went in the Gulf. Imagine if that happens all along the Mediterranean. You know, when Louisiana and all those 5 states got overwhelmed by that one that blew up, and they were worried that it might be capped and then blow up more under. So I think we have some real thinking as a human species as to how to go forward for sure. Anyway, thank you. It was a great talk. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's a fascinating idea. And AI, in other words, a good side to AI. Well, then that requires the people to really step in there and to understand it. I'm an attorney, and I'm already getting different AI programs. One of them is called Co-Counsel. And you're right. You can cut through a lot by using AI, but it's got to be regulated. Of course, the world, the big powers are trying to come to grips with how do we control the internet, right? Because people can communicate much more freely than they ever used to. And so how do you control that? So there's going to be struggle. There's no doubt about it. But, people need to also understand the mechanics of capitalism. And the driving force, as we all know, is competition. And so they're going to keep doing that, keep competing. But if you had people that it could actually use AI to track corruption, oh, wouldn't that be fun?
Great. Wow. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. Yeah, let's go to Claire. Claire, go right ahead.
What if China put some solar panels in Gaza and gave them some electric trucks, so that the part they could give in Gaza would that they would keep the 2-state solution and not interfere with Israel?
Well, yeah, that'd be great. In my opinion, whatever helps the Palestinians, which have not been allowed to develop their own resources. That's what the occupation is all about. But I got to tell you, it's gonna be a hard one. It's going to be difficult, simply because I was hearing that a 2-state solution is farther from being achieved than ever. And part of the reason is because a lot of Israelis are dug in. They were traumatized by October 7th, and they don't want any Palestinians to threaten their own security. But the thing is, on the other side, there are people exposing some of the myths of accompanying the whole history of the creation of the state of Israel right up to the present. And by the way, I'm going off a little off here, but I did want to get through that you need to look at the origins of the Balfour Declaration in 1917, with the British basically giving a green light to the idea of a Jewish state, a homeland in Palestine. And what I learned is Balfour, it was just a letter. It was a letter from Lord Balfour, Foreign Secretary of Britain, to guess who? Walter de Rothschild of the huge banking and oil empire. And so the creation of the state of Israel is likely to have been accomplished not because they cared about what happened to Jews who had been, exterminated in Europe. No, it was because they wanted a safe place to run the oil, to protect it, militarily protect it. And one of the things I learned when I was looking at all these different pipeline schemes, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, so on, and then I thought, well, where's the military supporting the Iraqi oil or the Saudi oil? And then I started looking at it, suddenly dawned on me, it's Israel. It's not just troops. It is the state of Israel that has been so militarized. And I would add, it's now a death trap for Jews. In other words, the mythology has to be exploded. And it's up to us to do it, to say, this is not helping you. And I'm so encouraged by Jewish Voice for Peace. They keep reminding us that what's happening in Gaza is not according to what they were raised on as the pursuit of justice that is so ingrained in Judaism. So they're doing a great job of challenging, and they need to be supported. But solar panel, yeah, that'd be great. We'll see. But there will be resistance, I guarantee you. But you got to keep doing it for our own survival, for God's sake.
Absolutely. Oh my God. And that's kind of related to David's question. Solar panels are working. Go ahead, David. We'll just squeeze you in just right now.
Okay, yeah, just in the chat, I just was wondering,
Hi, David.
yes, hey Charlotte, we may move away obviously from oil. That's what we have to do, obviously, to sustain humanity and the planet. But what if the same, and Gary says this in the film, what if the same organizations or institutions of power are still in control of that? Like the oil companies take over the sustainable energy sector, and then we, the people, are still shut out. They're the ones controlling distribution and sales. I mean, what do you think of that? Is that possible?
Well, that's a reality. And so I'm, he's coming to grips with that. They're immensely powerful. And then what happens when we have battles over lithium? We're already seeing in Bolivia, where there's a huge lithium deposits, and the people in the area are suffering from pollution and so on. I mean, so it's going to take concerted monitoring. Maybe it'll be AI that does it. Concerted monitoring on what the next step is going to be. Maybe solar panels, maybe that is truly the way out, even more than wind. But at least there is a move towards alternative energy. And there are enough people who are wise about the pitfalls, or certainly relying on fossil fuels, that, maybe we'll come out of this in a better situation. And by the way, if you look at the whole sweep of history, there's been progress. It's been very, very slow and at great human cost, but we can all hope. There's a wonderful song. I shared it with Arthur and Melanie. It's called Renaissance, and it's by a woman named Skin. It is so inspiring, and it is all, we will fight. We will bring justice. That was what was going on in Italy at the time of the Renaissance. I still hope that we will have a renaissance of thinking. We can certainly rely on a lot of Gary Davis's ideas and yours, and other people that are involved in this show. Yeah, let's keep hope alive.
Yes. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for mentioning, the fact that there is hope. We can have a renaissance. It doesn't have to be this way. There are other ways of doing things. There's different systems. We have the capacity. We can move towards a wonderful world for all and be more a part of nature like we used to be, more collaborative like we should be. There's lots of hope, lots of ways. So just pick a way and help out, everybody. And thank you. I just want to do a big thank you to you, Charlotte, before I send it back to Arthur. You are amazing. Thank you for your research, your bravery. You are so courageous. We're so pleased to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. Now we'll go back to Arthur. Arthur, take it away, please.
Well, thank you so much, Charlotte. And I'm glad you mentioned Gary's vision there, because, he actually started the kilowatt dollar. He was working with Peter Meisen on an energy grid alternative for the world. He realized that energy was a key part of how we build the people-powered planet and move toward need for decentralized and for people taking back control, so we're not dominated by the nation-state system, but that we, the people, move from being the governed to the governors of our small planet, as we take back our power to be in that rightful place of running spaceship Earth as we traverse the universe and keep this wonderful, beautiful, marvelous planet going. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for joining us. Do get Charlotte's book. I think I don't know if it's in the chat there, how you can get it, but just go to her website, which is just basically your name, right?
CharlotteDennett.com. Hey, you can get the book off Amazon, for heaven's sakes. Follow the pipelines.
Right.
It's easy to find.
Yep. Absolutely. Well worth reading, a wealth of information. Well, thank you, everybody. And come back next week when the guest, once a month we have amazing guests like Charlotte, but in between we have movies, discussions, action days. And next week we're going to be doing an important discussion that you can all be a part of. We'll be sending out more information about it. So you are the guest next week. So everyone come back,
Thank you, everyone.
every Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern, and the times around the world in our interconnected small planet. So thank you.
Well, this is what it's about. Interconnection. Thank you all that participated. I learned things today.
All right. Thank you, and have a wonderful day. And everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video.